All right, so we have an idea on the behavior. All right, we got deer charging around. We're bouncing them off cars at different times of the year. Now, let's talk about the hunting strategies. What does it mean for the guy in the tree stand for these times?
Well, I think in the late pre-rut and into the seeking phase of the rut, you're going to find that hunters are going to have a lot of action on their hands if they're in the right place. And so one of the things that I try to encourage people to do is, number one, understand where that bedding area is. That's one of the keys. That's his hotel. Then you need to know where is his feeding area, because he's still going to have to eat. Plus he's got girls on his mind, and those girls are going to be where the food sources are. Now, once you learn those two, where's that travel corridor in between? How is that animal moving? And I call that a transition zone, and that's one of the places that I really try to hone in on, because I'm looking for scrapes, I'm looking for rubs, I'm looking for that buck activity, because I'm after a nice buck.
Is this the late pre-rut?
This is the late pre-rut and the seeking phase.
Okay,
I'm going to be hunting the same way, both ways, because I know those bucks are starting to move. And I'm going to rattle, and now I'm going to be rattling pretty aggressively. It's going to be different than if I'm in the early pre-rut. Now I'm going to try to imitate two bucks that are trying to kill each other. I'm going to run that sequence somewhere 2 to 3 minutes. I'm going to space it out about 40 minutes apart. I've got a deer call, and I've told people many, many times that for every whitetail buck that I can rattle in, easily you can bring in 20 to a grunt tube. And so by using bleats and grunts, some of them guttural, then I'm going to be able to call that deer in. And I'm going to use that call perhaps even though I don't see a deer. And I might want to space any kind of calling sequence out about 20 minutes apart.
You know, Charlie, that's probably my most favorite time to be in the woods, is when they just gear things up and get out there, because the big boys aren't tied up yet breeding. So I have plenty of chance to keep them moving around. You know, what I'm going to do is concentrate a lot in and around food plots, okay? Not on the food plot at this point in time. The food plot is a gathering place for 15 or 20 does. Well, the buck, he's going to check that in an evening or a morning, even a midday loop, but he's going to check it using his nose. He's going to use a downwind travel pattern. So I'm going to start to where maybe pre-rut, I was up near the food plots, on the food plots, visually watching. I'm now going to ease back probably 75 yards to up to 300 yards, depending on the thickness of cover. The more open it is, the further I go away from the food plot. Ease back and start to try to intercept that buck as he's just using his nose to check and see what the girls are doing up in the main field. So as we get into this movement phase, what I want to try to do is identify on the property known areas where we'll concentrate does. It could be a sanctuary, it could be a bedding area, it could be a food plot, and I'm going to take a look at the aerial map, try to link a pattern where a buck would walk from one area to the next, put my stand in those locations, and kind of watch and see what happens. And for those properties, you know, my deal is where we lay this stuff out. For those properties where we don't have it, hey, over the winter we're going to create the bedding areas, or create the food plots, or create the sanctuaries, so that we now have the ability to hunt this way on our property.
Neil, one of the things that both of us do, we try to work the wind right, and I know we've done a previous show on thermals and air currents for this year's segment of Deer and Deer Hunting TV. But while I've got you here, I want to just ask you a little bit about how you make your setup relative to wind, because I know you talk a great deal about it, you do a great job with it to beat that whitetail's nose. Give our viewers a little bit of an idea of how you handle that wind situation.
Charlie, most of the areas across the country, there are prevailing winds that are relatively constant. If you look at it and say, hey, it's blowing out of the southwest 70% of the time, while you have a southwest prevailing wind. So if we can identify what your prevailing wind is for your geography, your area, at that point, you would actually travel around the property and map your winds. And I know we talked about this earlier, but it is physically going out there in the property and seeing how your air would move through structure pinch points, mountaintops or ridges or funnels or hedgerows, because that's the level of understanding that the deer has of the property. And when we start to think about the seeking phase now, when they're really getting out and moving in the later stages of the pre-rut, where they're out there trying to find does, they're not going to waste their time looking for does. Physically, like you and I have to, go out there and look to find the animals. They're going to walk 200 yards and smell 400 or 500 yards at a clip, use their nose to gather all that information. Once the hunter learns how that deer is using his nose, now we've got him.
And to kind of summarize what we've talked about today in the first segment of Hunting the Rut, those animals, when that full moon hits on November 6th, are going to be ramped up, the bucks are. They're going to start to really be cruising. And they're not going to be bedded as much, they're not going to be eating as much, they're going to be looking for does, because in that seeking phase they're going from doe group to doe group, kind of taking an inventory of what's there. And so they're on the move. They're not as frenetic as they're going to be in the chase phase, but they're nonetheless, their behavior's picked up. And the guy that hunts, pay attention to the wind. Structure your setup as far as between the bedding, between the feeding area, maybe along scrapes. You got that well-worn trail. You're using rattling antlers, you're using a deer call. You're trying to communicate with him so you get that perfect shot, chance of a lifetime, chance at a buck. So I think that that's one of the things we're trying to encourage hunters to do during this phase.